From the Air Europa Rescue, Mr. Ramiro Campos Gallego, to share information about the Commission's purpose. Mr. Ramiro Campos Gallego appears before this investigation commission, which was created by virtue of the agreement adopted by the full Senate on January 15, 2026. The purpose of this commission is to investigate and, if applicable, determine the existence of political accountability arising from the actions carried out by the State Industrial Holdings Company, SEPI. From May 2018 to the present, with special attention to the processes of granting aid, subsidies, public shareholdings, business bailouts, and other financial support instruments managed directly or indirectly by that entity. Her appearance takes place in compliance with the Commission's work plan and in accordance with the provisions of Organic Law 5/1984 of May 24 regarding appearances before the investigation committees of the Congress and the Senate or of both chambers. In accordance with that law, and under the terms of the summons that was notified to her, this Commission has required her appearance to inform it in relation to the subject of the parliamentary investigation, with the person appearing being subject to the obligation derived from Article 502.3 of the Penal Code not to lie in her testimony. All of this is without prejudice to the constitutional rights of the person appearing. Likewise, she has been informed, as provided by that law, of the possibility of appearing accompanied by a person to assist her. Acompañado de persona que le asista. As for the conduct of the hearing, which is public in nature according to the provisions of Articles 75.1 and 190 of the Senate regulations, the person appearing will answer the questions posed by the spokespersons of the parliamentary groups. We will now begin the statements from the groups. First of all, as the sponsoring group, Mr. Hernando from the Popular Party, the popular group in the Senate, has the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, Mr. Campos. I greatly appreciate your presence before this committee. We know you must appear, like all Spaniards, under the organic law. But anyway, in any case, I appreciate your presence, and I also thank you in advance for the cooperation that I am sure you will provide when answering our questions, considering the seriousness of the situation, which we must not underestimate. It should be clear from the very beginning that this committee, at its current stage, does not take anything for granted. We have no prejudices, but it is true that there is an abundance of documentation and information which is updated every day, by the way, and which points to clear indications of influence peddling, of corruption by high-ranking government officials and administrative authorities, with the help of accomplices and followers as well, and which is centered, pardon me, on a scheme aimed at facilitating and ensuring the resolution of problems. In this particular session, if you agree, we want to go over with you the reasons why we believe it is clear that Air Europa received preferential treatment regarding the operation. Treatment that, in our opinion, can only be explained by that scheme which made it possible. That a bailout, which under normal conditions, in our opinion, would not have made the cut, in the circumstances in which the bailout was granted, did indeed make the cut. It received the bailout for an amount of 475 million euros with everyone's money. So your presence here is also to give you and the company the opportunity to make clear and to prove your point. As Mr. Hidalgo already made clear in the Coldo Commission, there is nothing objectionable, no irregularity in the actions of the business group in which you hold a very prominent technical position. Just to remind you, unless you correct me, there is no ongoing accounting or criminal case, nor is it foreseeable that there will be any in the future at all. Because of what you say in this commission, there is no reason not to answer us or to refuse to answer on the grounds that there is a case against you. I also don't believe that the duty of professional secrecy justifies remaining silent, since you are here not in your capacity as a lawyer, and I don't even know what your circumstances are in that regard, but as a prominent member of the corporate structure of various companies, whose actions, when they involve public funds, must be subject to very strict transparency criteria before oversight authorities, such as, without a doubt, this commission. Basically, I would like to tell you in advance that I would prefer to stick mainly to the most technical, legal, economic, and administrative aspects of the Air Europa bailout file. And particularly indeed, we will focus on that bailout which, as you know, by itself practically represents the funds that were allocated precisely as a result of the application of this. Of this measure, or of this line of aid to strategic companies in crisis, and if we also add the 320 million that Boris received, which at the time of the bailout was partly owned, 49% by Globalia. I don't know if that's true. I understand it is. We will find that the companies owned by or largely held by the Hidalgo family received more than a third, specifically 35% of the entire fund applied to support the solvency of companies.
If you want, I'll explain the Boris issue to clarify for you because you mentioned Boris. At that time, yes, we had a 49% stake. You can hear me perfectly, right? We had 49% Globalia and Corporación Empresarial had 49%. The rest of the majority shareholding with control of the company, this is important, with control of the company, belonged to Barceló, Simón Pedro Barceló. Yes, who was in control? Simón Pedro Barceló. We all recall he was a senator for the Partido Popular.
I understand.
I'm saying this because we've been told that you're adding this 320 million loan to the amount of 475. The control and management of Abris Corporación, as I'll explain to you in more detail later, was held by Barceló Corporación. Yes, but for one reason. At that time, there couldn't be a single company with two airlines before the merger was finalized.
I understand, but you also understand that we're pointing that out. No.
I think it's perfectly fine to point it out. Also,
The only thing is that he had clear, obvious interest in this company.
just like you, I have been constantly hearing and seeing in the press any reference to Abris Corporation, to Evelo. They are companies that belong to Barceló Corporation, Simón Pedro Barceló.
Yes, that's a fact I appreciate. Simply clear. That's a fact I appreciate, a fact.
It's important so that whenever we talk about Abris, we know who we're talking about.
It's a fact there. It's an important fact, but it can't call into question what I've made clear, that Abris also received a bailout and that it amounts to 320 million euros. It should also be taken into account that Globalia also received a loan with Avalico of 140 million euros on May 18th, I believe, in the year 2020. In other words, we're talking in general, with or without avarice, about significant amounts of money. Well, let me tell you, no, but sorry.
I'm not sure if you're asking me. I don't want to ask yet. If you are, though,
Or if you're going to surprise me. No, I'm not asking. Sir, okay, yes.
Let's organize the debate since I know the witness hasn't attended before. One asks, the other answers. That's how it's going to go, but please don't talk over each other because otherwise, I don't know, the people watching on TV won't understand. Thank you very much.
Yes, Madam President. Yes, I'll ask you a question. The first question, would you call this operation a bailout or a loan? I'm asking because
I call this operation a loan. Loan. It's a loan of 475 million. You're referring, I understand, if you want to be very secular about it, you're referring, I understand, to the SEPI operation, which we call SEPI. Well, it's a loan, a 475 million loan with very significant, very relevant conditions. I'm not saying they're abusive because in the end, well, but we could say that. If you'd like, I can review our conditions from then and the interest rates. But the important thing, and just to make it clear, and I think maybe nobody has realized it, the 475 million euros that had to be paid back on November 26th, 2026 have been paid back. They've been fully repaid. I'll share a fact because it's important we all have the information. They've been repaid with interest. Do you know how much we've paid in interest? Well, I'll tell you. We've paid in interest, just for that loan, 100 million euros, 97 million euros. Huh? Eh? I didn't understand. I'm talking to my colleague. Sorry, I didn't think you were talking to me. I don't really know, Madam President, how the committee works.
I would ask you to please limit yourself to answering the questions I ask you.
Well, if one of your colleagues asked me, no.
No one asked you, don't worry.
Mr. Campos, I'm the one directing this, and at any moment, if I deem it necessary, I will interrupt. Thank you.
I was telling you, yes. I was telling you. We paid back the loan in full a year early, and we paid 97 million euros. That means the public coffers received 97 million euros plus 470.
Very well. I appreciate the information, and I won't ask you about it later, as I was going to do anyway. But certainly, the loan was obtained precisely from a fund to support the solvency of strategic companies, which was created by a royal decree law from the government according to a temporary framework approved by the European Union and which was aimed at companies that were literally at risk of ceasing operations or that had serious difficulties staying operational or that without temporary support. So if there is a loan is arranged through a specific line and a fund for companies in crisis, and it is an extraordinary procedure so that it is not considered a bailout because the question is, was Air Europa in a crisis situation at the time the loan was requested, at the time the bailout procedure was initiated?
Do you doubt that it was in a situation complicated? Yes.
Do you doubt it? No, I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. What I mean is that a loan linked to a crisis situation, obviously, and in a line where other financial instruments are allowed besides that fund, I mean, like the loan was used, but another type of instrument could have been used. So we don't agree with that.
The loan was the last resort. No, it was only possible to turn to the FAS, and that was one of the requirements when there was no possibility of using any other instrument, bank, fund, whatever.
It was the last one. So is it a bailout?
No, because a bailout is something else. One thing is a loan, and it's stipulated as a loan. A bailout is something else. We from Bilbao know what a bailout is.
Okay,
A bailout is something else.
very well, because it gets paid back.
The bailout doesn't get paid back.
Well, with your permission, we will continue to maintain that what was arranged through a loan was also a bailout. And I think semantics are important, especially when it comes to public opinion. But why? Obviously, your opinion and mine are very, very different. Totally. Well, let's continue if you don't mind. I take your positions as given. You don't need to answer me. Secretary of the Board of Directors of Global and the Business Corporation since 2009, right? Secretary of the Board of Directors of Air Europa Líneas Aéreas Sociedad Anónima Unipersonal. Correct. Since the same date. Secretary of the Board of Air Europa Holding. Correct. A little later, it seems. Correct. No? I assume that based on these positions, you were aware of important operations affecting the group and, of course, of the Air Europa rescue operation. My question is, what is your level of involvement? Or in other words, were you simply aware of the operations, or did you directly intervene and take action in them?
As you said, in my position as Secretary of the Board of Directors of Legal Security, I was aware, no, I carried out the operations with a team of people.
Of course. So, on September 22, when Mr. Aldama calls Javier Hidalgo or gets in touch with Javier Hidalgo in a conversation that was intercepted, tapped by UCO, and he says, "My friend, please let me help you. I can solve the situation. Trust me. Tell Ramiro to coordinate with me, that he handles the SEPI issue, and I'll take care of the rest with the ministers, and we'll get this done." Because it's clear, indeed, you were taking care of the whole matter. Did you participate in any of the meetings held by Javier Hidalgo with Vice President Nadia Calviño regarding the 140 million Avalico loan?
I did not participate in those meetings.
Did you meet Vicente Fernandez, former SEPI president, at SEPI headquarters? No.
I don't know Vicente Fernandez.
You have never met with him.
I don't know Rumia. No, I haven't met him. I know I haven't met him.
Did you meet Bartolome Lor before the rescue fund was created?
A few days before.
A few days before? For what purpose?
Well, let me tell you, on June 11th, 2020, we sent a letter to the ministry, so I don't lose track, to the Ministry of Economy, in which we requested assistance, a loan for Globalia Corporación Empresarial for 950 million euros. That letter, as a result of that letter, we were called to a meeting at SEPI at the end or beginning of July, where we were told that the Ministry of Economy had asked SEPI to take charge of analyzing this matter with us.
That was the purpose. Nothing came out of that meeting. And during the course of the rescue operation, you met with Bartolome Lor.
Bartolome several times. And as you know, all public officials usually meet with a lot of people and with a team.
Let's say you met with him as part of the loan monitoring committee.
No, the monitoring committee is different. After the loan is granted, there's a monthly monitoring committee.
I didn't hear him.
Once the loan is granted, there's a monthly monitoring committee.
Yes, I'll ask him.
He missed the monitoring committee meetings.
You were not on the monitoring committee. And the next question that arises is, what was the level of involvement of Javier Hidalgo?
Javier Hidalgo at that time was the CEO, and his involvement with the team was constant.
Were you aware of the meetings that Javier Hidalgo held with Nadia Calviño, with Begoña Gómez, with José Luis Ábalo, with Coldo Garcia, with Vicente Fernandez, with Bartolome Lora, aimed at making sure?
You said,
The bailout.
if you can cut them for me, because honestly, I'm going to tell you, as for Begoña, That lady had absolutely nothing to do with the loan.
But you cut. Did you know Javier Hidalgo met her?
And so that they're there, no.
Were you aware that he met with Jose Luis Abalos to try to ensure the success of the operation?
I think with Jose Luis Abalos, who was the minister in charge, the one an airline answers to, right? Meetings would be constant before and after. It's a constant relationship with the ministries, both when the Partido Popular was in government and when the Partido Socialista was. And we would meet with whichever minister was in office, the CEO, the secretary of the board, whoever it was. We've met with them. It's united. It's not. I'll give you a fact. The day the sale of Air Europa to IAG was signed on November 4th, 2019, that same night, around 6 or 7 a.m., Minister Abalos was called, so that he would know, I'm talking about a date you'll recognize, November 4th, 2019, so that he would know and not know. Luis Gallego and Javier Hidalgo called him so he wouldn't learn about it from the press. The deal was signed before it was announced to the press.
Yes.
But the truth is that, with the relationship with the ministry and with the Directorate General of Aviation, we are a very regulated company, and we have to have a lot of dealings because we depend on civil aviation and ASA, so the contact is constant.
But well, not only did he meet on November 4th today, there is also information that it seems they also met on October 28th. That is the same day that the Management Council prepared the proposal to send to the Council of Ministers, approving the operation. Yes, that's it. Thank you. Are you aware of this meeting with Jose Luis Abalos?
This is a photo, let me show you. October 28, 2020, Javier Hidalgo walking at 9 in the morning, 9:17 in the morning in Ibiza. Javier Hidalgo, you are mentioned in a news article that appeared today in the media. He is in Ibiza. It's impossible for that meeting mentioned by the newspaper to be correct. No, I'm telling you.
We will go into the temporary public financial support agreement that Mr. Hidalgo gave us at the time. And the least we can say is that it's a tremendous mess, not only because of the inherent complexity of such a massive operation, but also because of the accumulation of oddities and extravagances throughout the entire process. And I want you to know that when I talk about oddities, and use these terms several times throughout this questioning, I'm referring to cylinders. This circumstance in the file happens only with Europa. And therefore, it forces us to think that you receive preferential treatment to that extent, which can only be explained by the intervention of people who, by doing so, committed serious irregularities, even of a criminal nature. I'm not referring to you, of course, at least not initially, but rather to high-ranking state authorities. First of all, I ask you to simply answer yes or no. Is it true that the initial request, dated August 20, was made by Aero Europa Holding? Correct, that's right. And with a charge and 400 million euros were requested. Correct, correct. A second request was later made, which I don't understand, corrected, on October 13, which included an increase in the amount from 400 to 400 or 435 million euros. And now also including Aero Europa Airlines and Aeronova. Do we agree?
Well, it's just that you said something. Yes, let's verify it, because the request is to Aero Europa Holding, but it was also for Aero Europa Airlines and Aeronova. It was for all of them. In other words, the request is actually made by a company, which is the holding company, which owns the other companies. In both cases, if I'm not mistaken, the request is processed for the entire group, as you said.
You said, well, I'm talking about what's stated in the information that's in Exhibit 5 of the Temporary Financial Support Agreement. On August 20th, Aero Europa Holding submitted a request for public support from the fund. Later, it specifies that on October 13th, it's Aero Europa Holding plus Aero Europa Airlines and Aeronova. Let's talk about this holding company that interests us a lot, which is classified as the funded entity in the financing contract, and we're very interested in it for two reasons. The first reason is because there's something very interesting that the Court of Auditors says in the report that you probably know, I suppose, about the audit of SEPI's actions in the process of approving public support operations for strategic companies. I'm stating the full name now to avoid repeating it later. It also provides an important clue for defining the subjective part of the requirements and responsibility for the operation. And if you and Madam President allow me, I'm going to read you a part of what this report says. SEPI distinguished between legal requirements, which apply to each company as a legal entity, and economic requirements when analyzing eligibility criteria at both the company and business group levels. Thus, the legal requirements are those listed in sections A, B, C, H, J, K, and L of the agreement that you are familiar with, which would be required of all companies within the business group requesting support. Requirements for the applicant's operation as an economic unit would apply to the business group. Of course, this basically means, I don't know if you understand it that way, and it also comes from a report by the State Legal Service. This means that the legal and eligibility requirements, which are really important, I won't describe them to you because you don't know them. All the companies incorporated into the group, in this case, the economic unit that requested the bailout had to meet them. Do you agree with that?
Would you benefit all of them?
Yes, it had to be applied to all of them, meaning that this included or should include the holding company in any case. Do you agree with that?
Yes, the beneficiaries.
Should it also include Globalia, the owner of everything? No.
The beneficiaries.
The beneficiaries.
Do you agree with the ones who would benefit?
Yes, but the beneficiaries are part of a business group that depends on Globalia. Should I then make Globalia subject to the eligibility requirements? Yes.
Would there be any problem if I included it?
There would be no problem. Isn't it true that there was a problem with Globalia's outstanding tax debts as of December 31, 2019?
Look, no. There was no problem, because I don't know if you can see it. You can see it yourselves. There is a certificate from Globalia Corporación Empresarial, which was submitted in the file, in which it is stated by the tax agency that there were no tax debts.
Can you tell me the date of that certificate?
Well, let's see. 1 minute. Well, let me see if I can find it because I can't see it. You need to sign digitally. I can't tell you now since I can't see it. Certify it, man.
I think the date is important.
Yes, it's very important. It's in the file. I confirm it. 1 minute.
Well, if you agree, I'll tell you.
It's included in the file.
Yes. Could you provide it to the, sorry.
Ms. Meyer, date July 3rd. Thank you very much. I didn't see it. Sorry. Date July 3rd, 2020.
Thank you. Date July 3rd, July 3rd
2020.
of the year 2020. Well, it doesn't prove anything because what should be checked is being up to date with tax obligations as of December 31st, 2019.
These certificates have a validity period. If I'm not mistaken, it's 3 or 6 months. Thank you.
It has a validity period, indeed, a validity period. So it can't certify that there were no Globalia's tax debts.
We can certify that there were not.
There were no debts as of December 31st.
What there was a procedure. If you are referring to what has come out in the press, what there was a procedure, and that procedure was suspended.
Excuse me, before you continue, I would like to ask if you could provide that document to the Commission so that we have it among the one you just read, the certificate from the tax office. Yes, well, I would greatly appreciate it. In any case, I reiterate that this certificate does not certify the final status of Globalia's tax situation as of December 31.
If a certificate does not certify it,
From the tax authority,
I'm sorry, I don't know what certifies it.
but no, well, I don't know.
Honestly, sometimes I already think about the credibility given to a press article.
No, please, it's not a press article. You're saying it's certified that you have no tax debts as of the regulations date. I'm saying if you can prove it, do so. In fact, months. Please let the senator ask you a question. Yes, I would even ask you to provide, if you think you can, another certificate with an effective date of December 30, 2019, and I would greatly appreciate that. And we continue. The position of holding in the rescue is of utmost importance, as I'm sure you'll agree with me. Because according to the financing contract, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is listed as jointly and severally liable, just like the rest of the beneficiaries. And secondly, because holding appears as the representative of everyone, it is specifically designated as the representative and agent of everyone, including the guarantor, which is Globalia. And the contract adds the following, and I quote literally, even in the case that I were to fall under these situations of self-dealing, multiple representation, and conflict of interest. Or in other words, the financing contract includes the possibility, besides making holding, let's say, the lead entity for the entire operation within its corporate group. But I think this is the first time, I don't know if you're used to it, but I think this is the first time I've seen a regulation authorize three legal absurdities, which are self-dealing, multiple representation, and conflict of interest. Do you often see this in the transactions you handle?
That, from a legal point of view, is absolutely correct.
If it's authorized, of course. It's correct if expressly authorized.
It's absolutely correct if it's authorized and permitted. There's no problem with it.
Let's see Air Europa Holding at its founding.
Air Europa was established in the year, I'll tell you,
I can help you. November 17th,
of the year 2019.
November 13th, 2019. And on November 16th, it changes its name to the current one because it was originally called Merger Management SLU, and then it became Aero Europa Holding. Can you explain to me what was the reason for this name change just 1 month after it was established?
Yes, I'll explain it to you. Look. Since July 2019, the company Globalia Corporación Empresarial was negotiating with IAG the sale of the company Aero Europa Líneas Aéreas Aeronova, Suma Miles, and two other companies for 1 billion euros. We set up that company it's an absolutely confidential procedure, and the company is established to serve as the parent company of the future airline holding. So when the gentleman from IAG bought the holding, it would already have all the subsidiaries under it. We couldn't call it Aero Europa Holding, let me explain, because there were only 5 or 6 of us in the company who were negotiating that deal. And that deal, as you know, was carried out, as I mentioned before, on November 4th, 2019.
¿Dónde?
Where had it been contributed? Because I've read in the press, and I'm sure you'll mention it to me, that the company's share capital was 3,000 euros. A capital increase was made to that company at the end of November, in November or December, to contribute the whole project to the company.
That is the contribution of the shares of...
In the year 2019,
Yes, we're talking about 2019. 1 year earlier, the contribution went to the holding company, previously called Medimanagement. Yes, that's what we called it. The contribution of the shares of Aero Europa and Aeronova was made at the time of its incorporation, November 13 or later.
it was established with 3,000 euros, and the contribution was made through a capital increase at a later date.
Can you tell me the date? Yes, yes.
Just a second, and I'll tell you.
Just a reminder, the company name changed on December 17th.
Well, it could be that date. Look, here is a deed from December 17 that formalizes it in a public deed. An agreement in which a capital increase is made through the contribution of the companies Aero Europa, Líneas Aéreas, Aeronova, and Leon Activos.
That is, not only did the company name change, but basically the structure of the company itself within the global business group changed as well.
All right, share capital, shares capital increase.
All right.
Several transactions were carried out.
Enough. The question has been sufficiently answered. What business does holding engage in?
It is the owner of the airline group.
How many employees did it have when the bailout was requested?
At that time, it had no staff.
It had no staff.
At the time, it was incorporated. And staff was gradually transferred over. It currently has about 300 workers.
Do you know how many staff members it had when the bailout was requested?
I'd say it already had over 200 workers.
As of the date the bailout was requested, the bailout.
Exactly. But yes, because one of the agreements with IAG was that the staff from corporate services, from global corporate services, who provided services to the whole group, those who provided services to the airline company, yes. Flight control people and all those people, yes. Well, they would move to Europa Holding. So by the date we're talking about, the date of the loan signing, they would already have staff.
Is holding a financial company?
If you're asking me about its corporate purpose, well, it has a broad corporate purpose.
Man, the corporate purpose says, among other things, the formalization of financing operations, loans, or similar instruments.
It's not a financial company, even with a broad corporate purpose.
Well, I don't know.
I'm telling you, it's not a financial company.
I think the corporate purpose, formalizing financing operations, sounds a lot like a financial company. Don't you think so?
Well, it doesn't seem that way to me, but it's not a financial company because it doesn't give out loans.
But look, no, I'm talking about the financial nature of the company. If there's anything that shows some kind of irregularity in SEPI's actions, it's that in the financing contract, you don't have to look very far to find that the parties, in other words, SEPI on one side and the applicants on the other, actually state that it's not a financial company. Basically, because if it were, the bailout couldn't have been carried out. The technical staff are the ones who carry it out. But since, as we've said before, all the companies in the group have to meet the legal requirements. But look, the financial support agreement assigns two functions to the holding company. First, as the recipient of the funds, correct me if I'm wrong, and second, a financial function so that I'll interrupt you. You stopped interrupting.
Funds recipient upon contract signing.
Yes, yes, yes.
Given everything mentioned, I'll show you the contract. Actually, the recipients of the funds are the companies Aero Europa Líneas Aéreas and Aeronova, which are the applicants. Okay, and they were transferred. The money that Europa Holding received was passed down through mirror loans, sending the money down to Europa Líneas Aéreas and Aeronova. When the money was returned, the reverse process was done. The money was moved up from Europa Líneas Aéreas and Aeronova to Europa Holding, and that's how we paid back the 475 million plus the 97 million.
I'm convinced it was like that. No, it's just that.
There is no irregularity. No, there is no irregularity.
Well, that's not something we're so sure about. We believe there was a clear irregularity because holding, being a financial company, could not participate, which taints the whole operation. But look, what is clear is that the transfer of funds from holding to the two aviation subsidiaries happens through instruments. You talk about mirror loans, which they are obviously, but they are financial instruments. And therefore, holding is not only a financial company because of its corporate purpose, but it also becomes part of the operation with clearly financial functions. Because in the end, the airlines receive the bailout, but only after being financed by holding, which in turn is the one that gets the bailout.
The airlines were Europa Líneas Aéreas y Aeronave. But I ask you, do you doubt that Europa Líneas Aéreas y Aeronave were eligible and that the 4,000 employees they had were entitled? I'm surprised. No, I can if you want.
I can later, if you want, when it's my turn, give you my opinion on the matter. Yes, yes, of course. What we're talking about now are the specifics, the uniqueness of this operation that only applies in the case of Europa and therefore makes us think that there is preferential treatment. The first oddity, obviously, is that holding, being a financial company, meets the first and fundamental requirement for the bailout, which is that it should not be a financial company. Yes, well, I think we're done with this topic.
In general, can you explain?
But I can't explain it. President, no,
I think
that we have been sufficiently informed. We have called holding companies.
one of them was Celsa, which receives 550 million. Yes, we're not going to get into it, and
Let's move on. We're not going to get into that.
Y
No vamos a entrar.
Globalia.
No vamos a entrar. But look, just a very brief question, just to confirm for me. Is it true that dividends were distributed on 4 occasions between 2019 and 2020? Moreover, is it true that dividends were distributed on such a significant date as September 8, 2020, after the rescue request had been made and while the correction was pending to be submitted on October 13? Is that true?
that is absolutely false. But look, absolutely false. I'll say it again, false. You must have read that in some media outlet. Yes, let me explain. Look, let's show it, yes.
No, it's enough for me if you just tell me it's not true. No, but it doesn't erase the fact that there was distribution.
I think it's good for us to clarify this. This commission,
And what I have is limited time. No, but I'm going to give you all the time, Mr. Campos. And you can give me all the time in the world you want. But Madam President is going to limit my time accordingly.
that I have to give. Mr. Hernandez, Mr. Campos, allow me to...
Let Mr. Campos explain it. And
I will give it to you. You are asked a question.
have you answered my question, Madam President? Did you answer my question? She said it's a lie and false, which is what I got. Right, but she's making a proposal and asked me 2 questions.
I want to explain it to you because if not, you come here, make your statements, and that's it. No, I ask you please to let me explain. I will try to be as respectful as possible. And then I ask you, is there a dividend distribution? And should I explain it to you? March 19th, 2019. Against the fiscal year's results, okay? March 19th dispersed, March 19th, 2019. There is a second dividend distribution of another 6 million based on the previous fiscal year's results at the general meeting on May 29th, 2019. And there is a third, not 5. Third, not 5.
Tercero, no 5.
Dividend distribution on December 17th, 2019, charged to voluntary reserves. December 17th, 2019.
How many millions? 28 million, 28 million, 28 million.
When you say, and I have heard you say on occasion, that there was a general meeting held on September 8th, 2020, a general meeting took place on September 8th, 2020. And what that general meeting does is approve the result of the previous fiscal year, in which it is stated that there is a profit and there is a distribution to voluntary reserves and an interim dividend. What is the interim dividend? The one from 19, the one from March of 2019. And I'm telling you this because whoever has read the accounts must have read that in the minutes and they've copied it. There's an asterisk that says, once the dividend distribution was already done in March 2019, the distribution was already done, not 2019.
Ya realizada la distribución.
It doesn't mean this record, under no circumstances, means that in September 2020, a single euro of dividends was distributed, not even one. All the dividends were paid in 2019. And that's very good.
Reading the papers, that's very good. That's sufficiently clear. Indeed, they were distributed. It's your mistake.
Some media outlet made a mistake. They've published it repeatedly. So now it seems true. Yes?
Yes, but well, it still surprises us that on December 27, 2019, 28 million euros in dividends had already been distributed. For a company that was supposedly in crisis because it had already reduced its net income by 43%,
The company would be eligible. If the company was in crisis in 2019 on December 31st, we had to be profitable. Companies that are profitable, it's customary, they have the habit, and the People's Party knows this. I think it's good to remember that companies that pay dividends to their shareholders, right? That's good. It's healthy.
Next question. I'm very interested in the process of modifying the application from August 20th to October 13th. I'm telling you what's in the documents, as I said earlier. 400 million holding Second, 475 million holding airlines, Air Europa, Airlines and Aeronova. I'm very interested to know, first, who made the decision to restructure the conditions of the bailout in that way. Was it a joint decision by both? Was it SEPI's? Or was it exclusively the board of directors of Globalia?
Well, let's see. We submitted the application, as you rightly said, in August 2020 with figures from July, June 2020. We all remember that in August 2020, the airports weren't open, international flights weren't operating, it's an airline company. We had to restructure the viability plan because with that plan, it was unfeasible.
You were the ones who did it?
It's just that we are the ones who make the request.
Okay.
Look, we requested the 240 million and 275 million according to a viability plan that, as I told you, we have met it a year early, and we have returned 475 million.
Look, yes, it's already very clear. Look, another one.
Yes, I enjoy saying it because it took a lot of effort.
I'm glad. You as a good one, and it's very sad that we're sitting here
Discussing something we should all be happy about. The face fulfilled its intended purpose.
Of course.
And I think that the shame is that not all the money was provided and a great deal of money was left undispersed. That's the shame.
Exactly.
And the pity is that it wasn't quick.
Exactly. For us, it was slow. Look, that's what we're getting at. That's what we're getting at now. In fact, the fund granted 3.256 billion out of the 10 billion it was allocated. But there's another peculiar oddity at Air Europa. And you will understand, or you will know, that the operations, the financial instruments were first capital or hybrid instruments and were applicable participating loans, and only as a complement, ordinary loans, convertible debt, and so on. Sorry, debt, other debt, ordinary debt, and so on. So only where it was possible to use ordinary loans as a complement. And I'm not saying that there weren't ordinary loans in every case. But look, 63% of the 3,250 million were credits through participative loans. And the rest were ordinary, that is, the difference between one and the other exceeds 58%. There was an amount that represented 58% of participative loans over ordinary loans. But there is a very peculiar exception, which is precisely Air Europa, where the participative loan represents, compared to the 58% average, only 1.5% more than the ordinary loan, with the condition that precisely because of that limited difference between one and the other, it does not reach the 50 million that would have meant submitting to the approval of the European Union. Is this a coincidence? Was there any intention precisely to establish this proportion to avoid having to seek approval from the European Union?
Let's see. Answer. Look, the request is made by the company. The participating loan had much higher interest rates. You know that, I mean, the ordinary one is liquidity, the other one is solvency. And also, I can explain to you that if we had requested the 400 million as a participating loan, besides it being extremely expensive for us, we would have paid 70 million just in interest. A participating loan's interest alone would have been outrageous. Because right now we would be at Euribor plus 7 points, we would be paying around 11% if we hadn't paid earlier. So the regulation established that the granting of the convertible participating loan, the subscription of it, the concessions could not be improved. Here, losses will not be taken into consideration. It could not exceed or imply an improvement in the net equity of the beneficiary company. That is, we could not improve the net equity if we requested a participating loan.
Which company?
Air Europa Líneas Aéreas. It was counted for that.
But I'm not sure about that. That didn't apply to Europa Holding, right?
They were looking at it for the whole group because sometimes they look at it on a consolidated basis. As you know, annual accounts can be individual or consolidated.
Yes, but Holding was the holder of the shares. It was one of the beneficiaries, but actually the assets it had were those related to the shares of the companies themselves.
The solution to the issue was in the beneficiary companies, and the problem had to be resolved in the beneficiary companies and in the subsidized companies.
Yes, I agree with that. But it's also true that if we look at Holding's financial situation, that requirement wasn't met in regard to Holding either. I reiterate that the legal and financial requirements have to be met for each of the companies that make up the group. In this case, Holding. And look, the truth is that your contribution has been very interesting, and honestly, I'm running out of time. I would like to ask you, for example, because we haven't gotten to them, a compilation of the oddities of the peculiarities that we have seen throughout the procedure. That is, of the circumstances that individually and especially together prove it. In our judgment, a preferential, differentiated, distinct treatment for Europa, which, as I said, is not justified by Europa's situation, but by the involvement of other people who were precisely part of a corruption and influence peddling scheme to benefit Europa. And I would like to make this clear, point by point, so that you can say whether you agree or disagree. Look, among the peculiarities, the oddities that we have found, the first one, the limitation of the economic and business unit limited to Holding and the airlines Europa, Líneas Aéreas, and Aeronova, excluding Globalia, which is the sole owner of all of them. Do you agree with this?
No, I don't think that's odd at all. I think it's absolutely correct. I think it's correct.
Absolutely correct. The fact is that if Globalia had had tax debts as of December 31, 2019, it would have made all of them ineligible.
They didn't have any.
But would that be the case if it had them?
Within the group, it would have been about tax debts, but it was about the beneficiaries, not about Globalia Corporación Empresarial. Regardless of that, all the companies, because when we made the request to SEPI, we provided certificates from all the companies in the Globalia group because we also certified those from Alcon, which at that time was ours. Then Boris took it over starting in October 2022.
We have never fully understood what the purpose of Holding was. It seems to us, especially in light of what has been revealed throughout this hearing, that Holding was a means, I would say a fraudulent one, to act as a corporate firewall between Globalia and the aviation companies.
We must have been visionaries. The holding, Europa Holding, was created for the IAG operation, for the sale. There was no COVID. We were in 2019. COVID arrived in March 2020. We carried out the operation with Europa Holding. We've seen it to date. We were talking about December 2019 when we made the contribution. So visionaries who foresaw COVID and this and prepared for it, no.
I'm not talking about that. Either way, no.
No. The Europa Holding was established.
It was not intended to create a corporate firewall between Globalia and the aviation companies. No, look.
Europa Holding was the company that owned Europa Airlines and was established for the purpose of the IAG operation. IAG Iberia.
Third specialty rarity. Holding appears ineligible since it's a financial, not a productive, company based on its corporate purpose. It was not eligible either, we understand, since it lacked sufficient track record to prove solvency under the terms required by the European Union. Do you agree?
I do not agree.
Do you agree? Earlier, you said Holding was a financial company. It's just a company.
Well, you answered us. I said that.
The corporate purpose.
the company's corporate purpose is very broad, and I didn't say that there are many corporate purposes of many companies. You surely know that some have very broad purposes. Another thing is whether they actually carry them out, whether they engage in financial activities. I mean, that's intended, and I think you know it too, for companies, for banks.
But nevertheless, it did carry out a financial activity precisely in managing the funds it received to transfer them to its two aviation subsidiaries. No. Well,
I think that limitation is intended for banking entities that couldn't access funding from the fund.
the next special feature is precisely the authorization or even obligation for the beneficiaries to enter into agreements among themselves that involve self-dealing, multiple representation, and conflict of interest. No matter what you say, that's a legal absurdity. However, it was the only way the operations could be carried out as they were designed. The financing contract and the support agreement were necessary to make them possible, given the difficulties or the shareholding structure.
That's absolutely true. And common in the market, in the transactions, in the signings before notaries.
Another irregularity that has already been notified to you is the substantial, unjustified, and inexplicable alteration in the number and quality of beneficiaries and the amount of the loan between the first request on August 20 and the corrected one on October 13, which I believe you have already explained.
I've already explained this was a change we made due to the dramatic summer of 2020. The more we requested, the more interest we had to pay.
The seventh point is that this is the approved rescue operation in which there is a smaller difference between the amount of the priority participating loan and the ordinary loan, which is an instrument intended to be merely complementary to all the rescues that have been carried out at 1.5 compared to the average of 58%, making it possible that it was not necessary to seek authorization from the European Union for the loan. Do you agree?
No, we inform, don't we?
Do you agree that this information is true or that it had a fraudulent purpose?
Look, I don't agree with the information. The information could be, I don't know. I don't know the rest. I haven't studied the rest. I don't know what you brought up. I have done it. I have it here, but sometimes the Court of Auditors seems to say things correctly according to this, and other times it doesn't. So I didn't want to overstate things based on the Court of Auditors because it seemed like it didn't. And I don't know it in detail as such. I can tell you in response to your question that this loan was indeed reported to Brussels. SEPI asked us at the beginning of October, if I remember correctly, for the viability plan to be translated into English and sent. It was the first one, and it was sent to Brussels. And then, in addition, after a complaint from Ryanair, there was a court ruling that said the procedure and everything were in order.
No, yes, the Court of Auditors seems to have given its opinion, although we doubt some things very much. Next specialty. Limiting the reports on the company's strategic status to just two, both from bodies under a single ministry. And I'm not saying it's not strategic, but the unheard of fact is that there were only two airlines that obtained a strategic report from two sources that also belong to the same ministry, which were the State Aviation Safety Agency and the Directorate General of Civil Aviation. For example, if we talk about other favored airlines, Air Nostrum obtained 4 reports, including from the Community of Valencia and the Valencian Institute of Financial Studies. If we talk about Volotea, it obtained reports from the Chamber of Commerce of Bilbao, the Department of Infrastructure of Asturias, the City Council of La Coruña, the Department of Transport of the Canary Islands, and so on and so on. There were only 2 cases where only 2 reports were necessary. One is precisely Air Europa, and the second case, I'm sure you'll guess immediately. A hint is that it has only 1 airplane. Exactly, Plus Ultra and Air Europa were the only 2 airlines that obtained the strategic report, with only 2 reports from the same body coming from the same ministry, which was precisely the Ministry of Transport. Do you agree with that? I don't agree.
Because we already were. Well,
the data comes from the Court of Auditors report.
I don't know how many, but I'm telling you that we were already considered strategic, and in our notification from June 11, 2020 from the Ministry of Economy, we provided the documentation indicating that we were strategic on behalf of the No.
I'm not referring to your reports, but to the additional ones requested.
An essential service operator considered strategic by the Ministry of the Interior.
Could you provide us with that documentation as well? Yes?
Yes, with pleasure.
I appreciate it. Next oddity. The amount of the financial advisory contract in the file was on average 104,829 euros for the rest of the contracts. In the case of the financial advisory service, which you know was essential for Europa, the cost was 1 cent of a euro, 0.01 euro.
Excuse me, because I forgot to answer you something earlier. You said there were only 2 reports. I'll tell you, look, Cuatro Casas were the external lawyers for Prego Waterhouse and for Waterhouse.
Right?
And then also the Planning and Control Department, the Economic and Financial Department, EFD, the Department of Relations with the European Union. That's why we know that the European Union reviewed this. The Human Resources Department, the Legal Advisory Department, the Tax Department, the Audit Department. All of these, if I'm not mistaken, were reports that were added to the file.
Yes, but those aren't the reports. Those aren't the preliminary phase reports about the strategic nature, which are the ones the Court of Auditors refers to and lists as being multiple and from different departments. Doesn't it seem suspicious to you that the only two reports for Plus Ultra and Europa, which are the only ones with fewer than 3 reports, also come from departments linked to the same ministry, which is the Ministry of Transport?
Can you compare Plus Ultra with Europa?
No, we absolutely agree. No, please.
No sé, yo Plus Ultra-
With all due respect, it seems odd that if the only two...
We have 70 planes generate 4 billion in revenue. Yes, we have nothing to do with it.
Yes, I agree, but
We've paid it back.
you will understand that it is not a coincidence either that the only bailouts under the public scrutiny of this commission are precisely Plus Ultra and Air Europa, because they are the ones that have those kinds of peculiarities. Can you explain the issue of the cost of the external advisory report to me?
Financially, I didn't hire those advisors.
You didn't hire them? No, that's SEPI's responsibility. I know. They were fortunate to hire someone who usually costs 104,000 euros for just 1 cent. Yes, I agree. I didn't hire them. This is SEPI's issue, right?
I did not hire them.
Very well. Next oddity, the average issuance term.
Others took out the ICO loan, and I paid for it.
And
Well,
let's continue with the report and the average time frame. Let's continue with the financial report because I'm running out of time. The average time for issuing the financial report by external advisors was 153 days, while Air Europa's was only 19, which we have to relate to the fact that the average cost of 104,000 was reduced to 0.01 euros. Do you think this is a coincidence, or does it seem strange to you?
I didn't hire them.
You didn't hire them, okay? No, I agree with you. This is SEPI. Did you have any contact with the external advisors while they were preparing the reports? With Cuatro Casas and with Prado Waterhouse?
We negotiated the contract with Cuatro Casas, which is a top-tier law firm.
Yes, and I suppose Prado Waterhouse would have prepared the draft of the viability plan, I understand, which is what the financial advisors were supposed to do.
Our financial department prepared the viability plan.
But they had to interpret it, they had to apply it themselves. They validated it,
They validated it, they reviewed it, and they validated it.
Prado Waterhouse, right? We agreed on that. And finally, Air Europa's bailout was resolved in the shortest time among the 74 applicants, 70 days, while the average was 355. It's just that, look, the difference is also really striking. I understand that you have great technicians who help you prepare the documentation, but it's truly striking that you are 5 times below the average in resolving the cases. Don't you think that raises some suspicion for anyone who looks over the case file? We're wrapping up. Yes, we're wrapping up.
Would you like to answer? Yes.
Yes.
I'll give you 10 minutes.
We're wrapping up. I was telling Senator Hernandez.
Yes, but okay,
This is delayed, Mr. Campos. Should I proceed or can we do it?
we can.
No, ma'am, not 10 more minutes, no.
No, but it's important to clear things up because the press keeps saying, look, I'm going to give you an explanation. We're a company, like I said, very regulated. We just went through a very intense due diligence process by IAG Iberia. We had a huge data room. We went through a second due diligence when we applied for the ICO. The banks, because it said that it's public money, 35 million were public funds for us at that time. Yes, Iberia was given 1,100 million and 190 million in public funds. 190. Yes, I do. No, let me please finish. Just let me finish. Yes, what I'm telling you, what I'm trying to say is that we were quick, we were effective. But I'll also tell you, and I think you believe it, I think you should know, maybe even think about it. We signed the contract on November 11th, 2020. They disbursed 240 million to us. We requested a disbursement of 100 million euros because we didn't have any cash in December. And I can tell you the date. I can't see well without my glasses, but I know it was December 16th, 2020. Do you know when they paid us? We were nearly bankrupt. Well, I'll tell you. They paid us on March 25th, 2021. March 25th, 2021, They're adding it up as if they gave us the 475 million. It looks like they gave us the 475 million in November.
They gave you at least 240. No.
They didn't give us the 100 million. They didn't give us the 100 million because they forced us to change the board of directors after we had already changed it once. The board of directors was changed on December 23rd after the loan was signed. A board of directors with 5 members was created, 2 members appointed by SEPI and 3 by the global entity and the business corporation. Among them, as you surely know, the CEO has to be appointed, and that is determined by the board of directors once they are designated by the general meeting. You say that neither of the 2 appointed there could be CEO, so it had to be a third person, who is Mr. Valentin Lago. While that discussion was going on, we were not paid. We had to give in because it is a matter of public record that we had to give in and appoint Valentin Lago as CEO on March 24, 2020. On March 25, we were paid 100 million. The gentleman tells me that it's preferential treatment.
None? Yes, in light of the fact that he has answered.
All right, I'll give you 1 more minute to finish up.
Yes, he carried out significant capital transactions in Europe after the rescue operation.
What are significant capital operations?
Significant capital operations, for example, capital increases charged to debt.
No, we did, with prior authorization, we did a capital increase. You may remember there was a moratorium for all companies that were in a situation of dissolution. The moratorium kept getting extended, and at one point it seemed like it wouldn't be because it was always extended on December 28th. So we anticipated that the year, I think it was in 2024, maybe it wouldn't be extended, and we requested the possibility of doing a capital increase with Globalia Corporación Empresarial contributing 2 or 3 of their assets. And a capital increase of around 80 million euros was carried out, which IAG participated in.
It was authorized by SEPI, of course, and that's it.
It had to have prior authorization, and that was the sacrifice, another sacrifice that Globalia made to save the company. It contributed assets worth 65 million euros.
Very well. And finally, Madam President, there was a viability plan, obviously. To what extent was it fulfilled? I mean, did the viability plan's projections unfold under the terms on which the plan had been incorporated into the aid agreement?
We are in the year 2026. That viability plan established that we would repay the debt by the end of 2026. In November of 2025, we repaid the 475 million. I think we are.
Which was also a peculiarity of Europe because the rest had to start repaying in 2 years. Isn't that right?
No. Each one had their own conditions in that sense. Yes, I know it. You know it. We had those conditions. For us, that's why we're talking about the conditions.
Special conditions of the European Union.
No fun at all, I'm telling you. No fun at all. Okay, none.
Sir, Madam President, I'm finished. Thank you, Mr. Campos.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campos. Thank you very much, Mr. Hernando. Now the floor is given to Ms. Cante from the Socialist Parliamentary Group.
I just have to tear the paper.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Good afternoon, Mr. Campos, and welcome to the Senate. Allow me to give you some background, although I suppose you are already aware, about the reason for your appearance here today and the purpose of this investigative committee. And I am going to do so by starting with a fact that, for us, is not insignificant. This is already the 7th investigative committee unilaterally initiated by the Popular Party in this chamber. A committee of the Popular Party, with a work plan from the Popular Party and operating rules from the Popular Party. You just have to look at the absence of most of the groups in this committee. This is no trivial detail. It's evidence of the way things are done in this chamber. The investigation committees, far from being instruments to clarify the facts, are for the PP a partisan tool with the sole objective of politically undermining the government, and to get a headline or 2 to justify their narrative. Curiously, there are issues that spark an admirable investigative urgency in the PP, and others that, for some reason, never seem to find the right moment. Mr. Campos, I'm telling you this so you know that this investigation committee is following, or will follow, the same pattern as the others. It's the committee with predetermined conclusions. The committee with predetermined conclusions. The committee with predetermined conclusions. Creo que ya se ha dado cuenta con la última intervención del senador. Witnesses are chosen based on political convenience, and there's an attempt to create a permanent suspicion in public opinion, even if the facts don't support it. And specifically, this SEPI investigation committee has a very clear objective: the Andalusian elections and the discrediting of the former Vice President and former Minister of Finance and Socialist Party candidate, Maria Jesus Montero. Senator Camps, the senator from the PP, pointed this out in one of the first hearings of this committee, when he questioned a witness and told him not to get lost in the details. And in case we hadn't understood it well, Senator Foronda, the senator from the PP, explained it to us clearly during the hearing of the former minister last Monday. You should know, Mr. Campos, that if they have to cast doubt on the proper functioning of SEPI or the professionalism of everyone who was involved, the senators from the PP do so without any embarrassment. Therefore, Mr. Campos, you should know that you are here today as a mere instrument of the Popular Party. I don't know if their plan is going to work out. But let's talk about SEPI. I'm getting there, Madam President. I know you're looking at me. I'll get to that now. But let's talk about SEPI and the Solvency Fund, so we don't get lost in the whole jumble of the Popular Party's narrative. I want to clarify that SEPI is a public law entity attached to the Ministry of Finance, which manages state-owned shareholdings, which was created in '96, and its goal is to make companies in strategic sectors like energy, telecommunications, defense, or space profitable, contributing to the country's economic and social development. I want to highlight that the disciplined management of recent years is reflected in the strong improvement in the SEPI Group's results. In 2024, record revenue of 6.355 billion euros was achieved, 7.5% more than the previous year, after 3 consecutive years in profit. This entity is subject to parliamentary, financial, and European Union controls. CP was responsible for managing the Solvency Fund during the pandemic. In those complex and extraordinary times, it was a real lifeline for the strategic companies of our country. Let's remember that many viable companies saw their revenues suddenly collapse, putting their survival at risk, not because of structural problems, but due to an exceptional situation. This instrument made it possible to inject liquidity and strengthen their capital, preventing a chain of bankruptcies and protecting more than 60,000 jobs while preserving key sectors for our economy. By the way, most European countries also implemented measures similar to ours. The fund has proven its usefulness as temporary aid, with early repayment from companies that have achieved rapid and favorable progress, as well as an increase in their activity and turnover. To date, the fund has recovered more than 63% of the total public financing, and 10 companies have already repaid all of their loans, including Air Europa. And it's also important to explain that all the loan files from the Solvency Fund were subject to audit by the Court of Auditors, which have undergone various audits and have been validated by the European Commission. Mr. Campos, you were the director of the legal department at Globalia when you sought help from the Solvency Fund in 2020. And as you already explained in the previous questioning, you were in charge of the Air Europa loan. Your company was considered a strategic company. Could you explain to us since when it was considered a strategic company? And what did it mean for the company to be able to access the Solvency Fund loans?
Well, look, I'll answer your second question. If we hadn't been able to access the Solvency Fund, we would have gone bankrupt. Without access to the Solvency Fund, we would have gone bankrupt. Okay, on October 31, 2020, we didn't have more than 3.5 million euros in our checking account. Okay, it was the last resort, the last resort. No bank would give us financing, none. Otherwise, we would have gone bankrupt.
Well, so that was the purpose.
That was the purpose, and it has been achieved. Exactly. It has been achieved. A lot of jobs have been saved. We have paid a lot of taxes, both personal income tax and corporate tax, because the company, thank God, has made profits in recent years. And a lot of profits, enough to pay back the loan and have an incredible amount of cash right now, an incredible cash position. Not only was it saved before, but a great company was also created.
Perfect. As a company, the company's classification or strategic determination.
Essential. Thank you.
Because aside from that, for example,
On November 12, 2018 here, we were told by the ministry that we are an essential company and we were an operator of essential services.
sorry, I didn't hear you well.
Huh?
I didn't hear you no.
Sorry, my microphone isn't picking up. I'm telling you, in November 2018, they considered us an essential operator providing essential services.
Perfect. What was the procedure the company followed to access the solvency fund? And what criteria did they have to meet in order to receive the aid?
Well, there were specific requirements set out by regulation, okay? Set by a European regulation that originated in Brussels in March of 2020, okay? The surprising thing is that in Spain, this regulation wasn't applied. It wasn't transposed or developed until July, the beginning of July 2020. In March, Europe was already saying we need to help the airlines. In May, the European airlines, Lufthansa, Air France, had already received billions, 7 billion, 10 billion. And we had received, by May 5th, we hadn't even received the ICO. I'm telling you, not even the ICO. On May 5th, and Iberia had received the ICO, so there's a big difference. And Iberia's ICO was 1.1 billion, we got 141 million, even less than Volotea, which got 150 million.
Thank you very much. Do you know how many companies, well, I'm sure you do, but I'd like you to say it, how many more companies had access to the fund, and if the criteria for companies to access it were the same for everyone?
The criteria were the same for everyone. It was set. It was an administrative procedure. The administrative procedure had a 6-month deadline. I mean, I'm surprised when I hear that we were fast, that we were efficient. If 6 months passed, what happened was that the procedure would lapse. It was necessary to request an extension. All these procedures that have lasted a year and a half, it's irrational. We couldn't have endured it. It was impossible, absolutely impossible. Europe had already helped its airlines. The United States had helped its airlines. And there are other companies. It's not just airlines in the world. There are other companies. The sad thing is that here it took until July.
Who was involved in granting aid from the Solvency Fund?
Here, different ministries were involved. There was a managing council, which was made up of, I don't remember exactly now, but it included several ministries. And then there was the FACE. They were all civil servants and later external advisors hired by FACE.
Therefore, none of them was assigned. Perfect. So there's absolutely no pay.
Of course, assigned to SEPI.
Perfect. Neither the minister nor any politician, let's say.
It was an administrative procedure, fine, settled.
Did your company get better treatment than the others that accessed the fund?
Well, I can tell you there was no preferential treatment. And look, first of all, we were the first. Yes, we worked very hard to be the first. We had everything perfectly organized, everything in perfect order. Preferential treatment? None. I don't think so. And you can tell me if any other company had to appoint a CEO imposed on it to run the company when our company was solvent in 2019. The CEO at that time had to be dismissed. And the company was absolutely solvent. But because of COVID and because of a person we didn't know where they came from, we didn't know them. And to manage a company that had to repay the loan, and as we said, how is it going to pay back the loan with a manager we don't know? No, someone who doesn't know the team. We proposed several internal CEOs, and not the Hidalgo family. Not the Hidalgo family. The manager who had led everything was Javier Hidalgo, and he did a very good job until 2019. However, it seems that Javier Hidalgo had to be dismissed. Surprising. Surprising.
Okay, thank you very much. And once the loan was granted, did the company have to undergo any review of its viability plan or compliance with it? Can you detail what the monitoring commission consists of? And no.
Yes, we had a monitoring commission every month. It met monthly, 12 times a year, in which we had to explain the deviations from the viability plan. There was an agenda that was repeated, explaining all the procedures, explaining any new contingencies that arose, the treasury, the deviations, if there were any, explaining them. In addition to that, we had board of directors meetings where we, unlike other companies, had 2 members of the board of directors and a CEO imposed by SEPI.
And finally, just to finish, Mr. Campos, is the granting of aid from the fund to the companies of the Globalia Group currently under any judicial investigation?
No, none. There is no judicial investigation regarding this.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campos.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Kentons. Now, as has already been explained to you, Mr. Campos, you have 3 minutes, if you wish, to make any remarks you consider appropriate. Thank you.
Do you want to? Yes, I do. Go ahead. I'm going to make a first remark. I would like to make 3 remarks. One has already been repeated, that we have repaid the loan, that we have paid it back with interest, that we have paid, and I will repeat it, 130 million euros in interest. It seems unbelievable, but in 5 years we have paid 130 million euros in interest. So yes, it was public money from the European Union, but we have paid it back. The conditions were abusive. The conditions, they were about control. Absolutely. But well, since we've already said that several times, I want to mention something else, another thing which I think is absolutely relevant, and it's because of an issue that happened this morning. And with your permission, Madam Chair, I'm going to play a recording which is complete.
Which Ministry of Transport officials did Globalia contact about these shipments? That's not good, thank you. During the management of these shipments, which official from the Ministry of
Transport did Globalia communicate with? This is regarding the shipments. Let's put on the second one.
From that route in Tbilisi, several trips to Georgia were organized.
Mr. Letredo, please, I insist, don't make me repeat what these proceedings are about. I think we're talking about the masks, the transportation of masks, or possible commissions. And that's the scope here, right? Not other lines of business that you may have had, which matter little here.
It doesn't matter in the end.
As these are commissions that this
Regulation is receiving. The context,
the context is this morning's session. This morning we were in the same proceeding. I thought I heard it, saw it when Mr. Javier Hidalgo this morning was given this. So I know I wanted to say that this morning those recordings hadn't been, well, they had been cut off at a certain point. So it was simply to make that statement and to make sure that the entire recording was included. That was all. And then a second question, why? To put things into context, because we've been through 2 years getting hammered over everything, okay? And I'm going to read you a newspaper article, okay? Because whether it's true or false, I don't know. I don't know if it's true or false. I'm going to read you a newspaper article from a newspaper dated May 2, 2020. And it says, according to the news, the government intervened so that the refusal of Jorge Gorico Isari wouldn't cause the first major bankruptcy. Under Sanchez, Luis Gallego, the company president, sent an SOS to the Spanish government, which had publicly committed to support it. The Madrid executive contacted José Luis Ábalos, Minister of Transport, Mobility and Urban Agenda, to have him rearrange his schedule and ensure Bankia stayed on board. The government acted quickly and contacted Gorico Isari. Since that wasn't enough, Ábalos contacted Nadia Calviño, Minister of Economic Affairs, to have the ICO assist, given the airline's strategic importance for Spain's communications and transportation. Calviño continued. She called José Carlos García de Quevedo, president of the public entity, to urgently extend a line of credit for 190 million euros, the ICO 190 million euros. Of all Spaniards, one of the largest loans granted by ICO to a company in recent years. Around 11 p.m. that day, the banker made a turnaround, changed his position, and issued the check. If someone said this about us, where would we be? And I'm going to say Iberia is a great company. Luis Gallego is an excellent professional, and the only thing is, he had every right in the world to take 1,000 million and 2,000 because the company had to be saved. But what I'm saying is, change the names and put mine, Javier Hidalgo's, or whoever you want, we would be in all the media. I have nothing more to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campos. We will now give the floor to the spokespersons, 7 minutes each. Ms. Kante will speak for the Socialist Parliamentary Group.
Yes, thank you again, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, one comes here thinking they're attending an investigative committee, but after listening to the remarks by the PP senators, both this afternoon and this morning, you get the feeling you walked through the wrong door and ended up at an audition. Of course, with a rather predictable script from your party. Mr. Campos, I want to thank you again for your appearance and your clarity in answering, because it is essential for citizens to have first-hand information. our group would make the following observations. The actions carried out by SEPI regarding the loan that the company Globalia received from the Solvency Fund. They always complied with rule-based criteria serving the public interest and aimed to protect employment and the economic stability of businesses in the pandemic. That Globalia met the eligibility requirements for the granting of aid from the fund, just like the rest of its companies, and that the processing of the file followed the legally established procedure with all the required control mechanisms. That there was no favoritism in any case, it was not an arbitrary procedure. That the aid granted is not the subject of any judicial investigation. I think it has been made very clear, Mr. Campos. Therefore, I thank you. Members of the PP, public institutions, do not belong to any party. They belong to the citizens, and that's why there is something that our group will not allow, your self-serving attempt to discredit them. Because when you try to discredit institutions like SEPI or the Court of Auditors, what you are doing is weakening citizens' trust in the state and its institutions, and this has consequences. Not everything is fair game in politics. It's not acceptable to sow doubts about public institutions just to gain partisan advantage. Nor is it acceptable to divert attention from the kitchen trial or from your agreements with groups. It's not right to erode citizens' trust in what belongs to everyone. And even less so during times of such suffering as the COVID pandemic. Members of the PP, defending our institutions is not an option. It's a democratic obligation that means acting responsibly, with loyalty, and with respect for the truth, even when the truth doesn't support your narrative. It's the exact opposite of what you do daily in this chamber. That's why things are turning out this way for you, ladies and gentlemen. With this attitude, you will remain in the opposition for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, on behalf of the Popular Group, Senator Hernando has the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Well, since the representative of the PSOE addressed me, I will address her first. That's right. We are indeed looking forward to citizens having the opportunity to vote in the upcoming general elections. Give us the opportunity and we'll see what the citizens think about how you uphold the dignity of public institutions. Look, if this committee of inquiry has been launched, and this also goes for you, Madam Senator, it's because there are several names related to SEPI that are involved and that create a clear and justified suspicion. For example, Begoña Gomez is involved, prosecuted. Jose Luis Avalos is implicated and facing trial. Coldo is implicated and facing trial. Aldama is implicated and facing trial. And if we talk about SEPI, I absolutely agree with you. That's where we have to protect our institutions. And CP, formerly ENA, is probably one of the most important institutions in the economic history of this country. But I'm going to tell you one thing. If what we're talking about is protecting the dignity of SEPI, the first ones who need to take a hard look at themselves are actually your own group. Because look, where did all the problems around SEPI start? They started with Bartolome Lora, the current vice president, acting as president, who is under investigation by court number 49. Vicente Fernandez, who was president and a close confidant of Maria Jesus Montero, is under investigation by the UCO for his involvement in the bailout of Duro Felguera, which I suppose we will also have to discuss in this committee. And because he was doing business with some presidents of organizations and companies belonging to SEPI from his apartment on Diego de Leon. Because there are technical staff members, and we know there are technical staff members who have committed very serious irregularities. And Mr. Lora has only punished them with a little slap on the wrist and by removing them from SEPI. And we will also have to talk about that. And therefore, if you are so concerned about SEPI, what you need to do is let this commission act, let it fulfill its functions, and help it. Don't always try to cover for the government, precisely because you believe that the government is what needs to be protected and not the institutions that are part of it. As for Mr. Campos, I really appreciate your intervention. I absolutely do not agree with many of the things you have said, and I also believe that the data supports us. And if you ask me whether Air Europa should be rescued, I tell you, of course. We absolutely agree that Air Europa deserved and needed to be rescued. In the same way, we absolutely do not agree that Plus Ultra had to be rescued. But that's another matter. And you say that you worked a lot. But the problem, Mr. Campos, is not that you worked from a corporate perspective. The problem is that, I'm sorry to say it, but your boss, Javier Hidalgo, worked on a lot of people. He worked on ministers. He worked over the prime minister's wife. He worked on her. Please try not to interrupt me. He worked on Aldama, who is on trial, Abalos and Coldo, who are on trial. In short, the suspicions are clear. And our suspicions are based on the fact that there are elements that I have tried to break down for you and that you have sometimes managed to explain successfully. And at other times, I'm sorry, but with no success at all. That Air Europa received absolutely favorable treatment, which it probably didn't need at that time. Air Europa would probably have been rescued without Javier Hidalgo pulling strings through his friendship with Begoña Gomez, Abalos, and Coldo. And the payments made by Aldama, I think what doomed you, and probably Javier Hidalgo too, was the arrogance of thinking you could get before everyone else what was meant for everyone. And in fact, I have to say it, he did it. While the rest had to wait and had to meet conditions at least as tough as yours, but over a much longer period. Mr. Hidalgo managed to put Air Europa first in a completely irregular way, and by failing to meet some of the eligibility requirements. We understand that SEPI was only able to overlook the requirements that were being breached when it came to securing the bailout by turning a blind eye. Therefore, I have a lot of respect for your role. I greatly respect your statement, but I still maintain that there are huge irregularities in the bailout, which are documented. We would like you to provide all the documentation you have brought to submit it to this commission. If you believe, and I am sure you do, that we can reach a more favorable conclusion regarding this issue. And I want you to know that it is absolutely nothing against Air Europa. But we are very much against corruption, no matter who uses it or for what purpose. What we are fighting against and what this investigative committee is fighting against is primarily the corruption of politicians. And unfortunately, also against the corruption of those business people who believe that by using politicians in an improper or illegal way, they achieve their goals more quickly and effectively than others. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hernando. The agenda is complete. The session is adjourned. Thank you.